What if I told you that a towering, like 100-foot tall spruce tree in the middle of a dense Alaskan forest is actually made out of the ocean?
I mean, physically and chemically constructed from marine
Yeah,
nutrients, right?
exactly.
It sounds like magical realism,
Totally does.
but it is entirely factual. It is the result of this invisible, highly complex web of biological interactions.
Right. Well, welcome to the deep dive. We are talking directly to you today, our listener, the middle school life science teacher,
Hmm.
because you are the one standing at the front of a room full of, 12 and 13-year-olds, and you are tasked with getting them to understand that tangled web.
It's a huge task.
It is. You have to take these massive, endlessly complex ecological concepts and somehow make them click without causing like a total tidal wave of information overload.
Which is arguably one of the most difficult yet crucial challenges in science education today. Because, and we know this, you aren't just teaching them animal facts anymore.
Right. It's not a trivia game.
Exactly. You are teaching them how to read the underlying rulebook of the entire natural world.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission today is to decode the next generation science standard, MS-LS2-2.
Yes.
And right out of the gate, I mean, the phrasing of this standard is a total mouthful. It asks students to, quote, construct an explanation that predicts patterns of interactions among organisms across multiple ecosystems.
Yeah, it's dense.
Super dense. So to tackle this, we're drawing from some phenomenal deep research syntheses on Alaskan ecosystems from Bioforge, alongside some really rigorous middle school teacher guides.
And our goal here is to take all that high-level ecological data and just synthesize it into a clear, usable framework that is focused entirely on student sense-making.
Right. So before we jump into, kelp forests or the tundra, we really need to decode the architecture of what you're actually asking your students to do. Let's look at the verb in that standard. Construct an explanation. We aren't just asking them to memorize definitions, right?
No, not at all. This is the science and engineering practice, the SEP.
I know.
Historically, I think science class was often just a vocabulary test.
Oh, totally. Flashcards and quizzes.
Right. Can you define predation? Can you define mutualism?
Yeah.
But constructing an explanation demands that students look at raw data, identify a phenomenon, and build an actual evidence-based argument for why it's happening.
Right, which brings in the disciplinary core idea, the interdependent relationships.
Exactly.
But it's that third dimension, the cross-cutting concept of patterns, that I think is the real stumbling block for a lot of kids. I mean, when I hear patterns across ecosystems, it sounds a bit like abstract academic jargon.
It does.
So how do we keep a seventh grader's eyes from just glazing over when we use words like that?
Well, what's fascinating here is that recognizing patterns is the exact mechanism students use to transition from just, pointing at animals.
Like, look, a bear!
Yeah, exactly. From that to actually understanding systemic rules. Think of a pattern as a template.
Okay, a template.
Right. Once a student truly understands the template of, say, competition or mutualism in a local pond, they can take that exact same template and lay it over a brand new ecosystem they've never even studied.
Like the Sahara Desert.
Precisely. And they can successfully predict what will happen there. It gives a 12-year-old incredible predictive power.
Okay, but to spot those patterns, they first need to know what to look for, right? And as a teacher, that means dismantling some really deeply ingrained student misconceptions.
Oh, there are so many.
Yeah, and one of the biggest ones you'll face is that classic textbook food chain idea. Students come in thinking an ecosystem is just a neat, orderly, single-file line of one thing eating another.
Right. The ecosystems are just food chains misconception.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the first one you have to break, because the reality is that populations interact in so many ways other than just eating each other.
Right.
I mean, organisms die from disease, they compete for oxygen, decomposers recycle matter. It's a messy, entangled web, not a grocery store checkout line.
That's a great way to put it. And another massive misconception you'll encounter is only animals interact.
Oh, yes. Plant blindness.
Exactly. Students tend to view plants as just like the background scenery for the animals, but the research explicitly shows plants and fungi are active, massive players in these systems.
Absolutely.
They are constantly acquiring materials from the air and water. They're competing for sunlight. They are literally negotiating with fungi in the soil.
Which means we really need to equip teachers with the right framing. And since middle school teachers already know the basic definitions of these interactions, predation, competition,
We
mutualism,
don't need to recite the dictionary here.
right, no dictionary needed. Instead, let's talk about how to teach how these interactions function systemically.
Okay, so to help your students visualize the system, I like to use an analogy. Think of an ecosystem like a massive, chaotic middle school cafeteria.
Oh, I love this one.
It's not just a line of people passing food from one person to the next, right? You've got cliques competing for the best tables. That's competition for a limited resource. You've got friends sharing snacks and homework answers. That's mutualism.
That is a brilliant starting point. But if we want to connect this to the bigger picture, we have to include the abiotic factors.
The non-living elements.
Yes. So let's push your cafeteria analogy just a little bit further to show systemic change. What happens if the school administration decides to permanently lock the side doors and remove half of the cafeteria tables?
Oh, I mean, total chaos. Middle schoolers would riot.
Exactly. Because the physical layout of the room, the abiotic environment, dictates the biological interactions.
Yeah.
Removing the tables doesn't just mean kids stand up. It completely changes the social web.
Oh, I see. So the kids who needed tables to, like, trade collectible cards suddenly lose their territory to the kids who just eat sandwiches while standing.
Right. The abiotic shift forces a biological restructuring. Competition skyrockets because the carrying capacity of the room just dropped.
That makes total sense. And that perfectly sets up how you, the teacher, can prove to your students that these rules apply everywhere. Because a student might say, sure, Mr. Smith, that happens in a cafeteria or a pond, but that's just one example. To tackle that misconception, the idea that one example proves a pattern, you have to look at multiple, vastly different environments.
Because if it's a true universal law of biology, it must hold up whether you are in the Arctic or the tropics.
Right. So let's take your students to Alaska. The deep research syntheses from Bioforge give us some incredible macro-scale case studies. Let's start on the coast, the Aleutian kelp forests.
This is a textbook example of a trophic cascade, and it perfectly addresses another major student misconception.
The predators are bad idea.
Exactly. Students often think predators just destroy ecosystems by killing off all the cute animals.
Right, it's like a Disney movie mentality. But look at the sea otters. During the historic fur trade, sea otters were hunted almost to extinction. And without the otter, which is the keystone predator here, the population of herbivorous sea urchins just exploded. And urchins are voracious. They chewed through the holdfast of the giant kelp, like the base of the plants, and completely destroyed these complex underwater forests.
Leaving behind what they call urchin deserts.
Yeah, urchin deserts. So bleak.
And the abiotic environment fundamentally changed because the biological regulators were removed. And this is the crucial part to teach. When otters were protected and reintroduced, the pattern reversed.
Right.
Repatriating the otters led to a 99% reduction in urchin biomass. That single predatory interaction allowed for a greater than 99% increase in giant kelp density.
Which totally shatters yet another misconception, the idea that all interactions are direct.
Yes, indirect interactions are huge.
Right, because the otter doesn't touch the kelp. It doesn't fertilize it. It doesn't interact with it at all. But by eating the urchins, the otter indirectly saves the entire forest. It proves that predators are like critical regulators for biodiversity.
Now, if we move your students from the coast to the terrestrial boreal forest, we see the exact same interaction patterns, just with different actors.
Okay, lay it on me.
So instead of otters and urchins, you have the highly predictable boom and bust population cycle between the snowshoe hare and the Canadian lynx.
Oh, this one is fascinating because it's driven by both predation and competition, right?
Exactly.
The hare population booms, and suddenly there's massive interest-specific competition. So hares competing with other hares for the limited winter food supply. They overgraze, they begin to starve, and simultaneously the lynx population has boomed because there's so much prey available. So the lynx heavily predate on the starving hares, causing the hare population to just crash.
Which then, of course, causes the lynx population to crash.
Right.
And that allows the vegetation, the abiotic and biotic resources to recover, which starts the whole 8 to 11 year cycle all over again. The underlying mechanism is identical to the kelp forest.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Remember my question at the very beginning of this deep dive?
About the spruce tree made of the ocean.
Yes. Let's look at the freshwater Alaskan streams where wild salmon migrate. The sources detail this incredible salmon-bear forest nutrient cycle.
This is such a beautiful illustration of how matter physically transfers across ecosystem boundaries.
Yeah.
because the freshwater streams where salmon spawn are actually naturally nutrient poor. But the salmon spend years out in the ocean building up their body mass with marine-derived nitrogen and phosphorus.
Right, and then they swim hundreds of miles upriver. Apex predators like grizzly bears and eagles, they catch the salmon, but bears are picky, right? They often just eat the richest parts, like the brains and the eggs.
Yeah, they leave the rest.
Exactly. They drag these massive leftover carcasses deep into the forest floor and just leave them.
And this is where the system gets incredibly complex,
Mm.
because now the decomposers step in. Scavenging insects and fungi, like chanterelle and porcini mushrooms, they break down that organic salmon tissue.
Okay, hold on. A mushroom breaking down a fish is one thing. How does that fish then become a 100-foot-tall tree?
This is the absolute power of mutualism. Beneath the soil, there is this immense mycorrhizal fungal network. The fungi act as essentially an extension of the tree's root system.
Okay.
The fungi wrap their microscopic threads, which are called hyphae, around the roots of the conifer trees, like the Sitka spruce. The fungi physically pump the dissolved marine-derived nitrogen from the decaying salmon directly into the tree's roots.
Wow.
And in exchange, the tree uses photosynthesis to create liquid sugars, which it pumps back down to feed the fungi.
That is mind-blowing. It's like an underground biological trade agreement.
It really is.
And the data shows that up to 70% of the nitrogen found in the needles of these massive spruce trees can be chemically traced back to the ocean via the salmon. I mean, the forest is literally built out of the sea.
And to close the loop on this system, the trees then provide an abiotic benefit back to the salmon.
Oh.
The massive trees provide cooling shade over the river to keep the water temperature low enough for the salmon eggs to survive, and their extensive root systems stabilize the stream banks to prevent erosion, keeping the water clear.
So if you bring this to your classroom, you can show your students that whether they are looking at an underwater kelp forest, a snowy boreal forest, or a rushing salmon stream, they're looking at the exact same underlying template.
Exactly. Predation, mutualism, competition, and abiotic resource limits.
The actors wear different costumes, but the script remains exactly the same.
Which raises a crucial logical leap.
What's that?
Well, if these are truly universal laws of biology, they shouldn't require a massive landscape to function.
Right.
They shouldn't be dependent on having thousands of acres of forest or ocean.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. If these rules are absolute, what happens if we remove the landscape entirely? Like, do these patterns hold up on a microscopic scale?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the curriculum resources actually use the human body to prove exactly that. Let's look at the human microbiome.
Oh, yes. The human gut as an ecosystem. It houses approximately 100 trillion microorganisms, mostly bacteria. So in this scenario, a human being is just a walking, talking, abiotic environment.
We are the landscape.
We are. We provide the physical space, the gut lining, and the food for the bacteria to survive.
And just like the lynx and the hare, or the otter and the urchin, these microscopic bacteria are competing for limited resources. Some bacteria engage in mutually beneficial interactions, helping us digest complex carbohydrates while we give them a warm place to live.
Right.
But others act like invasive species, causing harmful infections.
And the guides highlight a truly fascinating case study to share with your students. Patient 23.
This is a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This patient had a life-threatening, harmful bacterial infection in their gut caused by C. difficile. But the successful treatment wasn't a standard antibiotic. It was a fecal transplant.
Which naturally elicits a lot of use from a room full of middle schoolers.
Oh, guaranteed.
But once you get past that gross out factor, it is a perfect, elegant demonstration of ecological competition.
Wait, so we're treating a bacterial infection not by nuking it with medicine, but by sending in a rival gang? Like, how does that actually cure the patient?
It's all about competitive exclusion. The harmful bacteria, the C. diff, were thriving because they had plenty of space on the gut lining and plenty of food. By introducing a healthy, highly diverse population of good bacteria into patient 23's gut via the transplant.
The rival gang.
Right, the rival gang. Those new bacteria immediately begin to compete for that exact same space and resources.
Oh, I get it. Because the good bacteria were better adapted to the human gut, they literally took up all the physical real estate.
Yes.
They outcompeted the harmful bacteria, starving them out, preventing them from reproducing, and ultimately curing the patient.
It is the exact same ecological mechanism that dictates plant growth in a crowded forest or animal populations competing on a tundra, just happening on a microscopic scale inside a human intestine. Space and resources are the abiotic limits, and competition determines the survivor.
Okay, we've explored some phenomenal science today, but I think the most important part of this deep dive is right here. How do you, the teacher, actually execute this in the classroom? How do you move a student from just listening to these cool stories to actually constructing their own scientific explanations?
Right, moving from engagement to application. The teacher guides provide some highly effective concrete instructional strategies for this. First, don't just tell them the story of patient 23 or the otters. Use comparison charts and raw data.
Like projecting pie charts.
Exactly. Project pie chart showing patient 23's gut bacteria breakdown from week 1 versus week 3. Ask the students to analyze the data, showing them how the size of the pie slices shifts as populations grow and shrink. Force them to identify the pattern before you name it.
Okay, that's smart. And the sources also emphasize active reading. Give students snippets of text or articles about these ecosystems and have them use annotation trackers. Encourage them to actively highlight the evidence of these interactions within the text.
Make them underline exactly where the text says the urchin eats the kelp.
Right. But I think the most powerful strategy mentioned in the guides is the reasoning tool.
Yes, the reasoning tool is fantastic.
Because it's a graphic organizer where students independently complete rows connecting a specific piece of evidence they found to a broader scientific claim. This forces them to explicitly state the why and the how.
Let's play that out because this is where students usually stumble. What does a failed reasoning tool look like, and how do you course correct it?
Well, let's say a student, we'll call him Jason. Jason is looking at the kelp forest data. In his reasoning tool, under evidence, Jason writes, the sea otters were hunted. Under claim, he writes, the kelp died. And he thinks he's done.
But he's totally skipped the mechanism. He missed the how.
Exactly. He missed the middle step.
So as the teacher, you look at that and say, Jason, the otter doesn't eat the kelp. So how does removing the otter kill the plant? What connects those two things?
Right, which forces Jason to go back to his food web snippet, realize he missed the sea urchin, and rewrite his explanation to include the indirect trophic cascade. He has to explain that hunting otters removed the predation pressure on the urchins, which allowed urchin populations to boom, which increased their consumption of the kelp.
That is a construction of an explanation.
Right. But this raises a great question, though. Once a student like Jason really masters this, how do you prevent the advanced students from getting on board? Like, once they see the pattern, how do you push them?
You increase the rigor of the explanation you demand. You task advanced students with predicting similar patterns in a completely new ecosystem. Give them a food web of a desert they've never seen, remove one abiotic factor like rainfall, and ask them to write a formal scientific prediction of how the entire web will restructure itself.
And justify every step with evidence from previous case studies.
Precisely. It's all about ensuring they aren't just reciting facts, but genuinely engaging in scientific argumentation. By the end of this standard, a student should be able to analyze a food web snippet or a set of pie charts, easily identify whether the interaction is competition, mutualism, or predation, and confidently write an evidence-based explanation predicting how a change in one population or one abiotic factor will cascade through the rest of the ecosystem.
All right, let's bring this all together. We have journeyed from the giant, towering kelp forests of the Aleutian Islands through the bear-filled boreal forests all the way down to the microscopic terrain of the human gut.
It's been quite the trip. And the core takeaway for you, the educator, is this. Focus on teaching the underlying templates of interactions. If you teach your students how to identify the mechanics of competition, the regulatory power of predation, the cooperative nature of mutualism, and the hard limits imposed by abiotic factors, you give them a universal key.
They will be able to unlock and understand the patterns of any ecosystem on Earth.
But before we sign off, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. Perhaps something to challenge your students with once they've mastered the basics. The sources repeatedly mention that abiotic factors like temperature, seasonal timing, and water availability are the foundation that dictates these ecological patterns.
Right, the physical layout of the cafeteria.
Yes, but the research syntheses note a rising phenomenon in the Arctic tundra called a phenological mismatch. Because of accelerated warming temperatures, the annual snowmelt is advancing by up to 11 days.
Okay, 11 days doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm guessing it is.
It's huge. This abiotic shift means that migratory shorebirds are arriving and hatching their chicks long after the peak populations of terrestrial insects have already come and gone.
Oh, wow. So the birds are completely missing the food source they rely on.
Completely missing it.
So here is the thought to take with you into your classroom. If these intricate biological interaction patterns, like the salmon feeding the forest or the otters protecting the kelp, are so deeply, intimately intertwined with the abiotic rhythms of the Earth.
How will our ecosystems restructure themselves when the non-living foundational factors begin changing faster than the biological organisms can adapt?
When the administration not only removes the tables, but changes the schedule of the entire school day without telling the students, the web doesn't just shift.
It risks collapse.
It's a massive critical question, and it's exactly the kind of complex, systemic thinking we want our students to eventually tackle. Good luck in the classroom, and thanks for diving deep with us.